Hello? Hi? Are you saying hello? Come here then, please, miss. We've got one purry baby here, haven't we? We've got one purry baby behind us. As always, this is my cat's house and I just live in it. By the end of this video, you will hopefully understand why mapping out your phase, or phases, is important and why I do it for every single one of my clients. I have about 12 years experience of training and 5 years experience as a qualified coach. I specialise in muscle growth for women and I'm currently in a building phase myself with the goal of building shape and building strength over these upcoming months. What I'd like to firstly start explaining is that there are different phases you can go through in order to achieve goals. There's a fat loss phase, a muscle building phase, a strength phase, a performance phase, a maintenance phase, and a lot more. But the main ones I focus on with my clients are fat loss, muscle growth, and maintenance phases. And this is what I'm going to be discussing in today's video. Now, when a client comes to me and they say, I want to build shape, I want to look defined, I always ask them about their starting point, their experience, how they currently feel. Because before going straight into a muscle building phase, it's important to decide what phase might suit you or what might be necessary for you first. If, for example, you aren't feeling 100% confident right now in terms of where your body fat is, you might feel like you want to be a little bit more defined, a little bit leaner before you go into a muscle building phase, then I won't just take you right in to a phase where you're going to be increasing your calories and working on growing. Purely because we want to be starting a muscle growth phase in the most confident position you can be in. Because as soon as you start gradually increasing your calories, it's not likely going to be a case of you continuing on with your fat loss goals, unless you are sitting at maintenance. If you are wanting to build muscle, build shape, build strength, it's still going to be really important and necessary for you to think about the phase that you initially need to go through. For example, if you feel like you could do with losing a little bit more body fat in order to feel more confident before going into a building phase, I would always recommend starting in a fat loss phase first. Whilst it is doable to go through body recomposition, which is dropping fat and building muscle simultaneously, it will get to the point where your body does need a little bit more calories to go off in order to keep growing. And you've also got to remember that you will only ever appear as lean as the muscle mass that you have. And what I mean by that is people automatically assume that in order to get lean, you need to drop fat and continue to be in a cut phase. But if you haven't spent time building muscle, you're only going to get as lean as the muscle mass that you already have. Now, if you do start with a fat loss phase, I would always recommend remaining within the cut phase for 6 to 8 weeks before having a potential diet break or a week at maintenance. I always make sure that I'm checking in regularly with my clients on top of their weekly check-ins, just to make sure that their appetites are in a good place, their energy levels are in a good place. And usually when it comes to the 6 to 8 week mark, it allows us to work around social occasions or holidays quite nicely, so they can have a mental reset and a physical reset before pushing on again. The duration in which you would need to stay in a fat loss phase for is going to be completely person dependent, and it will depend on how much fat you actually want to lose and how far you want to take it as well. But it is important to note that if you are wanting to build muscle and shape, you will still need to be weightlifting and focusing on eating enough protein. Once you're happy with the fat loss phase and you have dropped the fat, you're feeling confident to start with a building phase, that's when you want to slowly and gradually increase your calories via a reverse diet to take you into a building phase. Contrary to popular belief, you do not need to be shoving loads of food down you, and you don't need to be eating processed foods. In fact, I usually advise against that. What I do for my clients is we gradually look at building calories over a period of weeks, and we get to the point where we're then seeing some gradual, consistent increases with their data, their measurements, their strength is going up, they're feeling fuller, and I will sit their calories there for as long as we need to, unless we need to look at going for another increase and then gradually building them up after that. The quality of your food also really matters, and it does make a big difference to your body composition. So just looking at calories as calories and not as nutrients going into your body, fuel going into your body, your proteins, your fats, your carbs, will only get you so far with your performance, your recovery, and your results. That's why I work off a macronutrient split with a majority of my clients. When you've then got to the point where you are in a building phase, it's important to note that it's not only going to take you 4 weeks to build muscle. You will build muscle at a smaller rate in comparison to fat loss drops. And this is purely because muscle is more dense. You're going to be building muscle in grams, not kilograms. You have to truly commit and be ready for a muscle building phase. Going with the flow is not going to work. You have to keep on top of how everything is going weekly, because the thing with a muscle building phase is because you won't see changes as quickly as you might do in a fat loss phase, it can be very easy to drop off and lose interest. And before you know it, you've reverted back to older habits and you're back at square one. So I tend to work through smaller goals with my clients along the way. And it goes without saying that you should be following a structured weightlifting program. Every one of my clients has a program designed by myself based on the equipment they've got access to and the kind of exercises they work well with. And they are consistent with those workouts weekly. If you are training twice a week, 1 week, 4 times a week the next week, 3 times after that, your body is not going to know whether it's coming or going. You need to be making sure that you've got consistency with your workouts and you've set yourself a realistic target. If you're not logging your workouts as well and you're just going with the flow, chances are you're going to look back in about 5-6 weeks time and realize you probably haven't moved up the weight all that much or implemented any kind of progressive overload. I use my own app to log my workouts as well as my clients, but you could literally use something like notes in your phone. And just remember that progressive overload can come in the form of many different ways. It's not just the case of how much weight you're lifting, but it can be down to how many reps you're performing, the time you're taking between your sets, your form improving, time under tension. The last 2 reps of your sets should always be difficult. And if you're getting through them quite easily at the moment, we've got some progressive overload to be implementing in this building phase. When it also comes to being in a building phase, it's still important to be focusing on your overall quality of food and macronutrients in a building phase as well as a cut phase or a fat loss phase. In a building phase, we want to be making sure that we are minimizing fat gains and we are focusing on lean muscle tissue, because your body is only going to respond better for that, not to mention it's healthier for you as well. So eating enough calories, yes, is very important. Eating enough protein is very important, but also making sure that you do have some consistency with your nutrition routine and the kind of foods that you're opting for. I always say to clients, focus on inputting your whole foods into your diary first. And if you've got a couple of 100 calories left for enjoying certain things that you just want to enjoy, satisfy those cravings, feel free to do so. And lastly, regardless of what phase you're in, you need to give yourself a rest and you need to be getting enough sleep. If your hormones are out of whack because you're not getting enough sleep, if your body is stressed because you're not giving it enough rest, you are not going to progress in the best way that you could be. Your body's not going to be all that responsive and you're not going to be recovering very well. Your fat loss won't be as optimal if you're not getting enough rest and sleep. And if you're in a muscle building phase, you've got to remember your muscles do not grow when you are in the gym. They grow when you are resting, when you're recovering, when you're sleeping. There's also going to be times throughout the year where you want to be focusing on maintenance. And this could be when you're on a holiday or when you've been really pushing for several weeks. Your body and mind is going to need a rest at some point, regardless of whether you've been in a fat loss phase or not. And this is why I always make it clear to my clients that it is important to learn how to sit up maintenance and maintain your progress and your hard-earned results, regardless of where you're at in your journey. So to summarize, if you are just going with the flow with no set plan, you will likely be in the same position in a year to come. There are different phases to go through depending on your goals and your starting position, and there are different factors to think about during each of these phases. But the most important thing is having a plan and being consistent with that, which is why here at Evolve, we don't do going with the flow. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe so you can follow along for more tips and advice on your own fitness journey, and I'll see you over in the next video.